We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Sunday, and as you're listening to this podcast, I'll be en route to Georgia just in time, hopefully, for the indictments coming out from Vonnie Willis. I won't be anywhere near Fulton County, but I'll be in Georgia, so I got that going for me. It'll be interesting to see how people react. But we're fortunate to have a guest on the show today. You know him very well. He's been on the show before, Eric. And Eric is from Iowa, and he comes to us at a very opportune time with some activities going on down in Iowa. Hey, Eric, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we got the Iowa State Fair going on. Sounds like it's been a little bit of a cluster for some of these Republicans. Um, I haven't been down there myself. I've only heard bits and pieces, but it sounds like it hasn't been good for some of them.
Yeah. Well, you got all these guys. You got Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis were apparently there today, I think, or tonight. Maybe not together, but at the state fair at the same time. And all the other guys are trying to flip burgers and look at butter cows and watch little kids with their prize pigs, and they're getting 2% in the polls. So I don't know what they hope to accomplish. But we got a lot of politicians in Iowa at the state fair kissing a lot of Iowegian ass.
Yeah, they're trying, and for the life of me, as much as I like the fact that they consider Iowa so important, I really don't know why they're here. Most of the time, Iowa gets it wrong.
Yeah.
Uh, like we gave it to, what was it? I can't remember who we voted for in the Republican primary with Trump, but it wasn't Trump. We got it wrong. For that, when McCain went up against Obama, I think that was the year they voted for, was it Rick Santorum?
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And before that, like I think we get it wrong more than we get it right. So I don't know why they put so much emphasis on Iowa.
I don't know. I did a TikTok, and in the TikTok, I did a couple of Iowa jokes, which is common with Minnesota and Iowa. We've got a rivalry. As many Iowa jokes as I will have, there will be just as many Minnesota jokes. But I thought I'd tell you the two I thought of. First of all, you probably heard these before. What's the best thing to come out of Iowa?
No idea.
35W or I-35. And what do you call a Denny's with 3 tractors in the parking lot?
No
Prom
idea.
prom night. So anyway,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I feel
Okay.
I wanted to point out it's one thing to do it on the TikToks when nobody's around, but it seemed fair to give it to an Iowan, and I'm sure you've got plenty of Minnesota jokes too. I've seen those, and it is a rivalry, but it's amazing how starkly different Iowa and Minnesota is for as close as they are. I mean, I'll drive down to Iowa. There's a casino just across the border in Northwood, and that's a hour and a half drive. It's not a big deal. Um, so I go down to Iowa from time to time. I go to Okoboji, but it's so vastly different. I don't know if I would call you solid red, but you're way more red than Minnesota.
Yeah, I used to think we were purple until Donald Trump came along.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I mean, that and Iowa had to dig up a fossil to win the governorship when they brought Terry Branstad back, which
right,
then gave us Kim Reynolds.
right.
But I think I think we've done a pretty bad job when it comes to keeping Iowa purple because a lot of the younger people leave.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think the attitude's been, with this abortion thing and all the heavy red MAGA fascist stuff going on? What do you think the overall vibe in Iowa is? I mean, you're only in one area, but have you noticed a difference between the feel of Iowa now as opposed to 10 years ago, other than going from purple to red?
Uh, kind of, but um, I don't get out whole lot out in public, so I don't overhear a whole lot. But the coworkers and stuff I've talked to are on the younger side. Most of them at the oldest are Gen X. And a lot of them all tend to, if politics gets brought up and we start talking about it, they're all leaning blue and
Really?
toward, keeping for the most part, like I said, out of the ones that I talk to for coworkers and stuff. And they want to keep Roe v. Wade and they don't like Kim Reynolds, but either they're not getting out and voting or they're not active. I don't know.
What do you think the overall feel of Donald Trump in Iowa is? I mean, Donald Trump's stock has been fading a bit these days because of all the baggage, the bad publicity, the evidence. Do you sense any difference in feelings about Donald Trump? Because I always got the impression Iowa loved Donald Trump.
From what I've seen out in public, I would actually think his support is waning a little bit. And the only reason I say that is I don't nearly see as much Trump stuff
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
There was a guy, I haven't seen him around town lately. He might still be driving around. I don't know. He would drive around with a big old flagpole and a Trump flag off the back of his truck, and multiple people I would see, like this one older gentleman. I used to see him all the time. He would be coming around and he'd have a "Don't blame me, I voted for Trump" hat on
yeah.
everywhere he went.
Wow.
And just, but I don't see. And then you'd see Trump hats and MAGA hats, and you know the you still see a few, but I don't see as many in downtown. In the lead up to the 2020 election, there was on the side of a building, big old mural of Donald Trump, and I don't remember what it all said, but it was Donald Trump anyway, and it wasn't the best looking image of him. Almost looked like Hillary.
Wow.
It was done that bad. And then after a bit, it was 2016 too, and like it was going to be. Hopefully, I think they were ready for it to say 2024. Then he lost. Then they put the 2020 in for a while, and then after a bit, they painted over it. And
So
even
when
that,
all these politicians come to the state fair, what town is the state fair in?
Des Moines.
Des Moines. That makes sense. And so when the state fair comes to town and all these Republican politicians come, do they just do the stupid shit to make them look like normal people, pump gas, flip hamburgers, and shake people's hands? Or is there something more organized to the thing? I mean, do they have meetings and shit like that?
That I'm not sure on, but I'm guessing it is just part of a. I was always been kind of more grassroots, um, down to earth people. I think that's part of how the reason why that fossil Chuck Grassley still gets elected, because
Right.
he does like every time he's coming around to get elected, he does I think, is it a pig fry or a hog roast or some sort of a big feed for part of the state. And I know Joni Ernst does I think she does a motorcycle ride through town, through part of the state or something.
Wow. Fun.
Um, for some people it is, not for me, but
No, not for
um,
me either.
uh, but I think so. It's just Iowa kind of always likes to see people get down and be everyday people, and I think that's why they try to do it, is to come out and just to appear common.
I get a kick out of Mike Pence coming to Iowa. Guy has no chance to win anything. And he comes there trying to be one of the guys, flipping burgers, pumping gas. And this guy is the most plastic looking mannequin I've ever seen. He's a guy that's trying to be cool and he just can't do it to save his soul.
Yeah, he's a different breed, and they don't like him very well. Even even here, I don't know why he's still in the race even, but I mean, I heard the one comment. It was on can't remember which podcast I was listening to. It was either NBC or CNN earlier, and he did get a compliment at the Iowa State Fair. Um, one of the voters there said, "Well, I'm glad they didn't hang you."
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah,
Well, that's
that's
classy.
and that's the best thing that they could say about him is, "Well, I'm glad they didn't hang you."
Uh,
It's
what do you do with that? Somebody comes up to you and goes, "Good to see
I
you, Mike.
don't
I'm glad
know.
they didn't hang you." That's got to be a little disconcerting for Mike. Now,
It should be. I mean, go,
Ron DeSantis doesn't
go.
strike me as a guy that's going to go over very well in Iowa. Because Iowans are similar to Minnesotans in some respects because of the part of the country we're in. But Ron DeSantis is such a douchebag. I mean, it's one thing to see him from a distance and say, well, he thinks like Trump. He doesn't have the baggage. I'll vote for him. But then when you meet this guy face to face, I'm guessing he puts a lot of people off.
From what I've seen, I think so. He comes off as somebody put it, a robot in a skin suit. Like he's awkward. He doesn't know like he doesn't really know what he's trying to say or how to even act like a normal person.
No,
Sometimes it just seems out of place. And I don't really want to attack him over this one because I don't know. It came off weird. Even his wife comes off weird
yeah,
sometimes. And I guess there was an interview she gave with him standing there recently, and she was telling how good she was, or that Ron DeSantis was with her kids, not their kids, her kids.
wow.
And apparently, it came off as awkward and weird, and I don't know. He doesn't seem like somebody who would get over with everyday Iowans.
Well, no, he doesn't. He's just an oddball. And I made a prediction recently, and I'm curious as to what you think. Ron DeSantis is fading in the polls because of who he is. He's not a good candidate. He's kind of a socially awkward guy. But I think the end of this serious run for the presidency ends at the upcoming debates. Because once somebody calls him out and he has trouble maintaining his temper, he's going to blow it somehow, whether Donald Trump's there or Chris Christie goes after him or whoever goes after him. If Donald Trump isn't there, everybody's going to go after him because he's got more votes than they do. I just don't think Ron DeSantis can handle the pressure without losing his shit.
No, I don't think he survives the upcoming debate. I think Chris Christie's going to make pretty easy work out of him. And even the other uh, participants are probably going to take DeSantis to task with or without Trump there because he's a weak person.
Yeah, he
And like
is.
you said, he doesn't handle the criticism. He's gonna come off awkward. He's gonna probably lose his shit, and he probably won't stop saying the word woke, which
Yeah,
isn't resonating, and it's falling on deaf ears everywhere. It's definitely falling on deaf ears here.
yeah,
He was at a I saw a clip. He was at a event somewhere here in Iowa, and he kept saying the word woke, and he was doing this to stop the woke agenda and that to stop. I don't remember the exact terminology, but something like that. And it was one of those, things where he would say it hoping to get cheers or applause. And I'm pretty sure you could actually hear the cricket in the room. There was nothing. It fell completely flat.
Ron DeSantis, when he's talking to people, he does seem uncomfortable. He reminds me of the guy we've all worked with, that tries so hard to be funny, but isn't funny in the least. There's nothing more awkward than that, than somebody trying to be funny and they just don't have it. It's not something that they possess. They can't be funny. And Ron DeSantis is trying to be personable and he's just not, no matter how hard he tries. I mean, I would almost think when I see him laugh and it's so weird and the way he talks and the way he thinks, I think there's something off there. And I don't know what it is, but there's something off there.
I think you're right. And yeah, he does kind of seem that like kind of like you said, the person who's not funny but tries. Like
Right.
he's not very personal. He's trying to be,
Yeah. Too hard.
but you just it's almost like he has to tell himself every time, okay, I'm in this situation. This is what I gotta say. This is what I gotta say. And if something they're gonna say this, I'm gonna respond this way. That's a normal conversation. And then they don't respond the way he expects, and it throws everything off.
And you know, that's one of the reasons I like doing the podcast the way we do the podcast here. Too often, we were talking about this before, too often people try to make it like a radio show. So I've got to think about the questions I'm going to ask you. You got to think about how those questions are going to be answered so you're portrayed in the right light. I prefer just a conversation like we would have at a diner in Iowa or a bar in Minnesota. It doesn't have to be so structured, and too many people get in these situations and they get nervous or they lack confidence in what how they're going to portray themselves, so they have to be rehearsed or have notes, and it just doesn't come off well, and that's how it seems with him.
Yeah, I think you're right. He uh he just like I said, I think he prepares ahead of time. Well, I'm gonna walk into this restaurant, we're gonna meet people. So I'm gonna say, hi, how are you? They're gonna say they're fine, how are you? And if they respond anything off of that wording, he's not ready for it, and it throws him completely off.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but he just seems like somebody who's never maybe he's just not good at small talk, but he's just not personable, and it makes him come off kind of like a jerk or something, you know?
Yeah, you know, sometimes when I've watched him and I watch his face and you know how he laughs, the laugh is so phony. um I wonder sometimes, and I'm not saying this to start shit or to really to really insult anybody. Uh, but he almost comes off a little autistic, you know. And
Could
I know
be.
some very brilliant autistic people, but you know they don't catch the social cues as well as they do other things. I mean, it's just a it's just a weird variation on a personality. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're a politician, you got to be like a Barack Obama or a Bill Clinton who can make everybody their buddy if they meet with them. But Ron just cannot fucking do that to save his life.
No, and you saying that he might be maybe autistic or somewhere on that spectrum is interesting because when you say that it does kind of click that makes some sense. And the few people like well one of my coworkers, um, I kind of think he's that way sometimes, and sometimes you're trying to get a point through to him, and he's just not getting it, like about why something's wrong.
Right.
Like you know, what do I want to say? Like there was one night when he showed up to work, and we're supposed to work at 10-hour shift, and 45 minutes in he's wanting to go on his break already,
Yeah.
as the rest of us are all busting our ass, and he's like, well, what's the difference if I go now or I go later? I get the same amount of time. It shouldn't really matter. Well, yes, you do, but the first thing you accomplish shouldn't be that, we got to get some work done first. And no matter which way I tried to phrase it, I could not get through to him. That man, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Some people you just can't get through to. Which brings me to another person that's difficult to get through to is Donald Trump. Now, we had this hearing or this meeting the other day about the order of protection that Jack Smith wanted. And of course, Donald Trump wants to talk about everything. And I think Donald Trump's attorneys learned a few things when they sat and talked to Judge Chutkin. She was billed as no nonsense and take no shit. And I think they found out. I heard a story when she was listening to both sides about this order of protection. And this is an interesting thing. It was just a little story I read. Some writer who was there said that Donald Trump's lawyer, this Lauro guy, who we've seen on TV, who is fucked up immensely. He's implicated Donald Trump in crimes he didn't even have to implicate him in. But apparently, when they were going back and forth, Lauro started with the point where he says, well, the Biden administration is just coming after Donald Trump for political reasons. And apparently the judge rolled her eyes and then took her hands and put them in her face. And then Robert Laurel kind of changed strategy at this point because he realized he's embarrassed himself in front of this judge. And the thing about it is I don't think he would have normally done that under normal circumstances. I think Donald Trump is pressuring these lawyers to say things the way he wants to say it. And for the life of me, I don't know why lawyers do. They're just embarrassing themselves.
As far as why they do it, I couldn't tell you, but I think you're right. It sounds like something Donald Trump wanted to push, and if it wasn't Donald Trump, maybe it was, advice from the Republicans or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But she doesn't seem like the type that she's going to entertain anything about Biden. She's not going to probably entertain anything about it being a political persecution unless they have some form of proof.
Right.
And she's not going to take any shit from them.
No. We know that Jack Smith came out and he gave his proposed time for the start of the trial as January 2nd. And that's actually pretty reasonable. Gives them 7 months to go through all the evidence. They start in January. He said it'd be about a 4 to 6 week trial. We haven't yet heard from Donald Trump's team as yet, but they're going to come by and say, yeah, how about never? How about 100 years? They don't want the meeting to happen. And I don't think Judge Chutkin's going to necessarily give Jack Smith January 2nd, but it may be February 2nd. She isn't going to listen to the reasons for putting this out past the election.
No, she's not going to listen to any of that. But the thing that I thought was the most interesting out of all of it was she said, okay, I'm going to let you keep, you can't copy any of the information to any of the sensitive stuff. You can't talk about the sensitive stuff. You can't have your phone when you're viewing the sensitive stuff. You can't use a copy machine. You can't use a pen and paper, and you can't talk about it. But if you fail to comply with what we do, and you can't stop talking about the stuff that we've told you not to talk about, in the interest of justice, we might have to have this case earlier rather than later. And I thought that was pretty interesting. That it tells me she'll probably be closer to whatever number Jack Smith says, if the defense is too unreasonable. But at the same point, if she doesn't grant January 2nd, she might keep that in her back pocket as a backup thing. Oh, well, I said March 1st, but Donnie, you're still talking? Okay, now we're at February 15th. Oh, Donnie, hey, you're still talking? Okay, fine, we're at February 1st.
Yeah, I think that was the most compelling thing she said. I mean, she said a lot of stuff that put Donnie Trump and his lawyers in place, but she threw that in there, and it told me how smart she is. It was kind of a side jab because, like you said, if you keep doing it, we're just going to have to speed up this trial, knowing that Donald Trump and his lawyers want to slow it down. So that kind of put them in a position where they have no choice. The whole idea of Donald Trump going out there and yelling and screaming and threatening and doing all that stuff, that puts the lawyers in a bad position because it may speed up the trial, but also to consider that because the judges are supposed to control Donald Trump, if Donald Trump continues to do the shit he's been doing, the lawyers are going to be in trouble too. They could be sanctioned. They could be disbarred. They could do any number of things if they can't control their client. And it's Donald Trump. And I'll tell you right now, they can't control their client.
No, they can't. And I really think he might be able to control himself for a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be able to control himself overall, because we've all noticed this. Like right now, he's focused probably on her and the DC investigation. Then there'll be some news out of Florida, and he'll be focused on that, and he'll be bad mouthing anybody and everybody from that, which could end up being some overlap because there could be overlapping witnesses, etc. And then, if it's Tuesday or whatever day next week, when it comes out with the indictments, that's all he's going to focus on. Then if something is introduced about E. Jean Carroll, well, that's all he'll talk about for a day or two until the next thing grabs his attention. And then the minute something comes out about DC, he's probably forgotten that he was told he can't talk about it. And he's just going to say it.
Yeah, he is. He is. And, that's what I've said about him before. People want to believe that he strategizes and he's a thinker and all that stuff. He's very emotional and he's very reactionary. It's like if I call you a poopy butt, immediately you go, you're a poopy butt. It's just a reaction. It's not even thought out. You can tell because some of the shit he says is so lame. He just reacting. If you push him, he's going to push you. If you say something to him, he's going to say something to you, whether he's thought about it or not. And that's the danger with Donald Trump in the Washington D.C. case, because he's going to fucking do it. He's going to break the order of protection, and she's going to have to do something.
Oh, she's going to have to do something, and I think she will. I think you were the one saying he's probably going to get several chances where they call him back in and say, "Look, I told you, you can't do this. Okay,
Right.
We've been over this. Now I told you can't do this. Now these are the additional things you can't talk about. Now we're talking about it again. Next time I'll jail you." And I think it's going to eventually end up with him in jail on a contempt charge.
Yeah, I mean, you would think it would based on how he behaves up to this point. But I was talking about that yesterday. I was that she's going to tighten up his restrictions first, and then she'll give him a stern talking to, and then she'll say, "Listen, I'm running out of things I can do to you. The only thing I have left is to put you in jail. So you're on notice now. You keep this shit up. I have no choice but to put you in jail." So now the onus is on him. He knows the deal. He's been warned. If he does it again, you can't blame the judge. You got to blame Donnie Trump.
Yeah, I think I can't imagine a scenario where he doesn't break it enough times that he ends up in jail, unless
Yeah.
they give him a really, really wide berth.
She doesn't seem like the kind of woman that Judge Shutkin, she doesn't seem like well, I said it in a TikTok. I said, it doesn't seem like Judge Chutkin suffers fools, but I think she loves to create suffering in fools. And because she's,
I think you might be onto something.
yeah, yeah. I mean, she's not going to take too much shit, and the fact that she's a black woman uh, doesn't make it any easier for Donald Trump to hold back, given what he thinks about women and people of color. It just can't go well. Um, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on the 28th when they choose this trial date, because I know it's going to be shorter than what Donald Trump and his lawyers want. And they are going to rant and rave and scream and yell, but then they're going to get in trouble because they're not supposed to do that. It's almost like a trap set for them.
Very well could be. Even that, like, depending on how much nonsense that goes on, even between now and that trial date, she might look at the information and say, "I know, Jack, I know you said January 2nd. That's enough time, but these guys are already being foolish. Let's move it up. Let's move it into December. How about November of this year?"
Yeah, yeah, no shit. Well,
They've already been foolish. I want to get this thing over with, just so I don't have to deal with them anymore.
yeah, exactly. And the thing about it is that she also said something else. Donald Trump's team came to her and said, "Well, he's running for president. He's kind of busy. We're going to have to figure out how to structure this because his time is tight and all this stuff." And she said in no uncertain terms, "Look, I don't care if you're running for president. I don't care if you are president. In this courtroom, you're a defendant. That's all you are. And everything else that you tell me other than this trial is your day job. That's your fucking problem." And I like that attitude. That's the attitude that should be taken because Donald Trump's been given too many accommodations, like with Aileen Cannon and these other lawyers or other judges. They've been too easy on him, and he needs to be snapped into accountability and forced to do what everybody else should do. I think that's the one thing about Judge Chutkin. I think she's going to be the one judge that we see that we can believe fully when she says no one's above the law. I don't normally believe most people, including Merrick Garland, when they say that, but I think with her, she fucking means it.
I think she does. And I also like the fact that she straight up said, I don't care who you are, you know, in this courtroom, you are afforded all of the rights any defendant would be given, any citizen would be given. You know, so she already said, hey, I'm not going to treat you any different than anybody else the other way, too. I'm not going to say, well, you know, you were president, so you should have known better, or, you know, anything like that. Or she's going to say, you know, expect him to be treated the same way she would you or I if we ended up appearing before her for whatever reason.
Right. And these are all the things that Donald Trump does not want to hear. She is the absolute worst judge he could have in his mind because he's all about, you know, he's been a guy with a silver spoon when he was a kid. He's been bailed out of every problem. He's never been accountable for anything. He's been given deference because of who he is or how much he has. And she's just not playing that game. And that's going to be confusing to Donald Trump because he's never experienced that before.
Oh, very much. It's going to be confusing. It's going to piss him off. And I'll be there with popcorn because I enjoy that. But no, she's going to treat him just the same as everybody else. I bet you she's going to refer to him as Mr. Trump, which will piss him off. You know, she's not going to kowtow and say, well, former President Trump,
Yeah.
just because it makes him feel good. She's not going to pat him on the back and say, Donnie, you're so brilliant. And he doesn't know how to react to this. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody else pointed it out. Let's see. He's called Fonnie Willis racist, Letitia
Right.
James racist, Alvin Bragg racist. How long till he starts throwing those insults around at her too, and
Yeah.
really pissing her off that way too?
Well, I gotta tell you, I think Judge Chutkin is pretty solid, pretty serious, kind of the Judge Roy Bean of our times. But Fonnie Willis, that woman's a gangster. I would not fuck with Fonnie Willis because she can't be shaken. You heard the story where he said that she slept with some gang member, which I don't even know where he fucking came up with that. And Fonnie Willis didn't say that's not true. He's being mean. She said, "Listen, you got till Thursday to prove it. If not, it's going on my list for trying to intimidate a prosecutor." Fucking dumb Donnie Trump. He didn't come up with any evidence. They never have evidence. So he's got another charge coming over and above all the other shit that's going to be coming out of Georgia.
Yeah, I heard about that. And on top of that, apparently she directed her people. Don't you know? You're gonna hear stuff about this. They're gonna ask you to comment. The answer is no comment. Don't take any comments. Don't even ignore it all. I can handle everything that's coming toward me because of this.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I thought that was, you just like, you guys don't have to worry yourself any bit about any of this nonsense.
Well, as much as Donald Trump is emotional and reactionary, Fonnie Willis and Judge Chutkin are just the opposite. There is no emotion. Even though they might be the fairer sex in Donald Trump's mind, they ain't fucking around. And they aren't emotional. They're all business. And like I say, that's the last thing Donald Trump fucking needs is somebody, a woman of color, who's going to take him to task. And there is no wiggle room at all. It'll be interesting to see what judge he gets in Georgia, because that'll have some bearing on what happens in Georgia too. But he's in trouble in D.C. He's got the judge. The judge isn't going to recuse herself. There's no reason to do that. He's not going to scare her away. Donnie Trump tried to kick out Fonnie Willis. That didn't work. Everything Donald Trump is trying now is not working. And this has got to be ripping him up inside. All his little strategies that he's normally done, none of it's working now. And I wonder if he's smart enough to realize he's losing and he's going down the shitter quickly.
He's not smart enough to know that he's losing. Even if somebody tells him, he'd come back with something dumb like, "Wow, I just haven't found the right thing to say yet." I'll think of the right words and they'll bow to me. He can't admit that he's losing. His brain and his ego can't take it.
Right.
The
Well,
minute he accepts that he's losing, he's gonna have a meltdown, and he might have a defense of not saying to stand trial.
Well, he did say something yesterday that I think is a positive thing for this country, amazingly enough. When he was asked about it, because people have talked about this pleading out, getting a plea deal. I don't see Jack Smith or Fonnie Willis or anybody giving him a plea deal. But Donnie Trump said he would not accept a plea deal. He said, "Why would I? I'm innocent." And the reason I think that's important, you can't necessarily believe Donnie Trump, whether he'll take a plea deal or not once he's cornered and there's no way out and jail is the only option. He might take a plea deal because he's got no other choice. I just don't know if the attorneys are going to offer the plea deal because of this. All that's gone on, all that's been said, all that we've seen. It's been horrific for this country. It's been dangerous. It's put our country at risk. I think we really need these trials to go through the full process so we hear everything about it and we see some accountability meted out. I think that's important. Everybody talks about, well, the country needs to heal, so maybe we don't prosecute Donald Trump. I think it's just the opposite. As bad as it's been, we need to see Donald Trump prosecuted to put this country back on the proper track, because I think people are feeling a little funny about whether this country really has any teeth in its laws and in its norms, because Donald Trump has trampled all over them. We need those trials to be completed. No plea deal is going to be good for this country.
I doubt they'll offer a plea especially with the number of charges. But even if they do, they would never offer a deal, no matter how screwed he is, that Donald would accept. Because any deal they offer would probably come with enough jail time that he would spend the rest of his life in jail.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It doesn't. In the 4 that he was charged with in D.C., the total maximum sentence would be about 55 years. In my mind, if Donald Trump gets, out of all the charges he gets, if he gets one conviction for 5 years, that's a life sentence. I don't see him surviving 5 years after being thrown in prison.
You might be right. I would, it feels weird to be talking about it like this, but I would think a 10-year sentence is probably closer, just because you usually cut it about in half for, with good behavior, potentially cut in half. But if he's got to sit 5 years total in prison, even if he lives that long and he's able to walk out of there a free man at the end of 5 years, he's going to be in no shape to do much of anything. Let alone even running his mouth.
Well, and see, the thing about it is, I always tell people, don't get worried about the trials, because he's got right now 75, 80 charges against him. He could have another 70 by the time it's all said and done. All these DAs don't press charges unless they feel pretty confident that they're going to win. The idea that Donald Trump would run the table and not get convicted of any is just ridiculous. That's not going to happen. And the idea that he would only get convicted of one felony, that's pretty ridiculous too. Chances are he's going to get multiple felonies, and even if they give him 2 years on each one of them, he's still going to spend a lot of time in prison. Because you
Oh,
got
yeah.
all these different jurisdictions, they might try to run it concurrently. So say he gets 10 years for this, 10 years for that, then he only really does 10 years. But then what happens in Georgia? What happens in Manhattan? He can't come out of this good. He can't come out of this as a free man. It's just not going to be possible.
No, I don't think he'll come out of that a free man. Um, and I hope and that sometime between now and whenever that time comes that he does pass, I I kind of hope that Congress passes something so he doesn't get all the pomp and
Yeah,
circumstance, pomp and circumstance of a presidential funeral.
right. I agree.
Because if he goes to prison for everything he did while president, he doesn't and shouldn't have doesn't deserve and shouldn't have all that pomp and circumstance. I don't care about the fact that he held the job.
True, true, true. Well, I tell you what, Eric, we're going to take a quick break. And we've got plenty of other stuff to talk about, more about Georgia and some of the things happening. But we'll take a quick break and we will be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. I've got listener Eric with us today on this Sunday, and we're all kind of gearing up for Monday. This next week is going to be interesting, assuming what we hear to be true, that Fonnie Willis will be issuing indictments. We know that the grand jury in Fulton County is coming together on Tuesday. There might be one other person being or testifying. So the grand jury will be back in session, and a lot of people are presuming the indictments will come out of that. At some point, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe Thursday, we will hear something. Don't know that that's true. I'm not making a prediction on it because you can't, but it's inevitable that it's going to come. And chances are it's going to come over the next few days. Now, Eric, what intrigues me about Georgia's indictments, it's almost getting mundane. Oh, Donald Trump got indicted again. Okay, cool. It's hard to believe that you can say that, but kind of true. But this Georgia set of indictments could be fucking wild because of the RICO thing, the racketeering. Because when they talk about RICO, that means a whole bunch of motherfuckers are going to get indicted because that's what RICO is about. And we have heard that anywhere from 12 to maybe 15 other people will get indicted over and above Donald Trump. And I think that is going to create a fucking ripple like nobody's business throughout the entire Republican Party. It's going to change everything.
I think you might be right. And it might even be more than the 12 to 15 we're hearing. That might just be 12 to 15. I'm thinking it's 12 to 15 national people, national names.
Right.
We don't know how many state level representatives or state level members of the Republican Party have been involved in this.
We know the fake electors. Yeah, the fake electors. There could be 16 of them.
Yeah, well, I heard 8 of them had already taken immunity
That's
deals.
Right. That's right. You're right about
So
that.
there's still 8, but you don't know what those 8 happen with them. The ones that and those are probably caught by some state Republican Party. Just it's one thing after another. There's going to be a cast of people that are going to get charged with this. And it's going to be a big indictment.
Yeah. We're getting a little interference with you're kind of glitching out here a little bit. I don't know if that's the internet on your end or my end, but we'll keep going here and try to get that figured out. But the one I'm really most interested in, because I think he's the one that seems the most freaked out. I mean, Rudy Giuliani's already got a target letter. We know he's going to get indicted, but I'm really anxious about Lindsey Graham because he's an emotional motherfucker, and you can see he's nervous right now. You can see the whole Republican Party is kind of nervous waiting for this Georgia thing. It's really fucking with him.
Oh yeah, and we don't know, depending on the scheduling. We kind of thought that they would do all of the federal trials before Georgia even goes to trial. But
Yeah.
more I think about it, the more, now you're hearing Jack Smith say January 2nd, maybe later. There's a chance that Georgia, these guys get indicted now, and they're up on trial sometime next year going into elections. I think Lindsey Graham's up this year
I think he
for
is.
re-election. There could be, even if the trial doesn't hold, the fact that he's got RICO charges might make his seat vulnerable, which normally I don't think it would have been.
Yeah. One of the things we keep hearing about is this 14th Amendment, the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, putting Donald Trump or anybody who's tied into that incapable of running for any office. I understand that some of the things that Fani Willis is charging would involve the 14th Amendment, and Fani Willis's, if she's convicted of any of these, that would preclude him from running for office. And I know that's a big thing that everybody's worried about. So hopefully that's true.
That could be. And that would be very interesting if we end up having them charged to the point that they are ineligible to run. There's a lot of, from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of confusion over how that would work with the 14th Amendment, because some are saying this alone is good enough. All it would take would be for an everyday citizen to sue in court, like sue their Secretary of State or whatever, and say, I don't think this person's eligible for the ballot. And they can maybe prove that they were part of it. That might be enough. Other people are saying it does take a conviction of some kind in the courts to make them ineligible.
Well, there are a couple of guys, constitutional scholars, if you will, who also happen to be part of the Federalist Society, which is weird because they're highly Republican and highly conservative, and the people that vet and help the Republicans appoint their judges. There's two guys that have said in their minds, after studying it, Donald Trump is currently not eligible for running for president. Now, I don't know if that's true. These guys obviously know more about the Constitution than I do. But unless there's somebody willing to push that issue, whether it be a politician or an election official or whoever, it's not going to happen. But it's interesting that people who would normally side with Donald Trump are saying, yeah, he's already fucking done. He can't run.
Yeah, to me, that's very interesting. I was hearing something about that. They were talking about what could happen with that. And one of the nightmare scenarios they were talking about is, what if Donald Trump somehow wins the presidency?
Yeah.
Don't see it happening, but
No, it's
nightmare
not going to happen.
scenario. But nightmare scenario, somehow, some way, they sling enough mud at Joe Biden, or economy takes a turn, or who knows, and Donald Trump somehow squeaks in and wins in the electoral college, because he ain't going to win the popular vote.
No way.
But what happens if he's already ineligible, or they think he's ineligible because of the 14th, and you have sitting members of Congress, enough of them say, hey, we're not going to accept his electors because he's ineligible.
Right.
Now
Right.
suddenly you have one hell of an issue, and where do we go from there? Has got to be resolved sooner rather than later.
Well, you know why this particular story is kind of interesting is because there was a guy, a representative in New Mexico, who was at January 6th, and they used these very same things, and they sued, and they won, and that guy could not run for election, could not have a seat in the legislature or whatever it is. So it's been kind of tested a little bit on a local level, and it worked in court. So it's a matter of, does somebody take this up and then take it to court and shut Donald Trump down? I don't know if anybody would do it. I mean, it's not it's not like Donnie has a lot of time for court cases at this point. He's kind of busy. But does somebody take that up and try to push that issue? Because I think of all the things I talk to people about, that is the one thing they're most concerned about, is him running and winning again. I try to assure them that's not going to happen, but they don't always believe you. They're still worried about that shit.
Yeah, they are worried that he's gonna win again. Which I agree with you, it ain't gonna happen. But this does need to be tested, whether I think somebody who knows more about the law than me should maybe try to take this up with her, like in a lawsuit. And it very easily could be something where, one federal judge rules one way and the appeals court and the Supreme Court just punt it and say, okay, we've got a ruling, and they don't want to take it up as long as it's on decent legal grounds, and just kind of, okay, well, you made your ruling, we're not going to overrule you, but we're also not going to issue you a verdict either way.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've seen with the judicial system. They make a lot of claims, but they always back off of situations if it's a little uncomfortable or what have you. And that's one of the things I think we're going to see change. I think when Georgia comes out and hits some of Donald Trump's inner circle, which it's likely to do, and then if Jack Smith comes out and hits sitting members of Congress, we're going to see a huge sea change in just about everything in this country. It's going to decimate the Republican Party. They aren't going to do well in 2024, and afterwards they're going to say, what happened? And we're going to have to reimagine themselves. I think we're in for, with Georgia and whatever else Jack Smith has, incredible changes in this country, legally and politically.
Oh, I think you're right. I think it's gonna be that they're gonna be in for a shock. But I think what people aren't, one thing, a coworker told me, and I don't know where he heard it, I haven't looked in to verify it, but he said that he was watching, was talking polls. And how Donnie seems like getting 60% of the Republican vote for the primary or whatever. Now he's the strategists are saying that those poll numbers only represent about a quarter of the entire Republican voter base.
Right. I mean, that's the thing about polls. We don't know who's taking them, who's paying for them. We don't know who they're calling. It's very tough to take polls seriously because they've been wrong so often. And we don't know what their credibility is because you got such a bunch of different polls. Some are really bad. Some seem to be really good, but we don't know if any of them are any good. So what's the point of even having a fucking poll if you can't trust it?
Oh, I don't know, especially considering most of them anymore. One of the podcasts I was listening to said, well, who do they primarily call people with landline phones? Well,
Right.
who primarily has landline phones? The older generations. I haven't had a landline phone in 15 years.
Yeah. Mostly they have to call landline phones, and that's generally old rural people. And we know what they think. We know that they're big Trump humpers and the big Republicans and conservatives. So the sample you're getting is a little bit tainted. It's really not that accurate. So why do it? And somebody, I don't know, I was talking to Lisa, and she said it's almost like the polls are more for the media, so they can stir some shit up and cause people some anxiety and get them worked up so they continue to watch their source more and more. And I tend to think that's true. The poll situation, we put way too much weight in it, and it's just not accurate enough. It never has been accurate enough.
Well, I think it used to be very accurate 15, 20, 25 years ago when they were calling people landlines and everybody had a landline,
Right.
you know, before we got away from having them. We're getting a wider sample size and they were able to talk to more people. And I think that worked out a little better. But no, the polls are not accurate. And I think whoever you were talking to is correct that they are for the media, and all forms of media for the most part are guilty of this. They cherry pick
Right.
which polls they want, which poll they want to talk about on any given day. So
Right.
even, a news station might find one that shows, oh, Joe Biden's losing in the general election poll to Donald Trump, 90% to 10.
Yeah.
Man, his favorability just tanked. And they'll hype that story and they'll run with it for a couple of days to get you scared, get you to tune in. But if you check the average of all the other polls, it's right where he's always been, about 38 to 40% favorability.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's one of the biggest problems I think we have in this country, and why we're so divisive. Talked about it before. No matter where you go to get your news, you're going to get a different story. And so often I'll be talking to somebody and quote something that happened and they won't even know about it. So no wonder we're divisive. The people who think differently than us just don't know any better. And maybe there's some things we don't know. There was a time when you could trust journalism and trust the media. You just can't now. No matter who you watch, whether it's Fox News or MSNBC, you can't trust they're going to be completely, I won't say honest, but completely upfront with you on everything. Because, somebody like MSNBC or even Fox News, it isn't always about lying to you. It's about lying by omission, not talking about it, not giving you information that you should have that might have some bearing on how you figure you feel. That's kind of why what we do with the rational boomer, give them the information that for whatever reason the media is not willing to offer.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the media, and both sides do it. They both omit things.
Absolutely.
They only cover bits and pieces. Now, even though CNN is shifting more right, they're at least better about the stuff they omit being outright lies and misinformation, and not giving airtime to certain things. But they both run whatever think they need to run. That's going to get you to go to their website. It's going to get you to turn into their podcast or their news channel or what have you. And they're going to they only care about making views, money, and ad revenue.
Right, right. Now, I've been hearing people talk about this, and I've been trying to watch it to see if it's true. And I have, and it is kind of true. It seems like Donald Trump, wherever he's going, whether it be his rallies or on television, he already has a fragile emotional state, but it really seems like he's losing it because he's really scattered about what he talks about. He gets emotional, he gets little twitches and stuff. I think what's going on now is already taking a toll on Donald Trump.
Oh, I think you're right. There was a clip I saw of a recent rally that he did with it was on Fox, I think. And he was in the middle of saying something, and he was in the middle of a word, and he kind of just sputtered and completely changed where he was going mid sentence.
Right.
Which I mean, following his line of thought is like you need a roadmap anyway, but this was bad even for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he stumbled and sputtered, and then all of a sudden he was still kind of on the same topic, but it took him a half a second to gather his thoughts and go back at it. And it kind of reminded me of the Mitch McConnell thing.
Right. Right. Well, and, that's one thing I've said before. I always tell people I don't think Donald Trump will be the nominee. and they can't see it because he's so far ahead in the polls and the primaries and stuff. And I get that. But I've always thought when you're 78 years old, which you will be in 2024, and you just can't handle things the way you used to, and the pressure gets to you a little bit, I'll guarantee you there is no politician in the history of this country that has more pressure hanging over his head than Donald Trump. Donald Trump has a fragile emotional state. He may be starting to sputter and starting to lose it because of that pressure. And it's only going to get worse over the next month or two. It's going to get overwhelming. And I just don't know that he's going to be mentally or physically fit enough to even run for president. I mean, not that somebody's going to kick him out, that he's just going, people are going to go, God, you got to put him in a rubber room. This is crazy. We can't do this anymore.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree, especially if some of these trials start, as they're currently laid out.
Right.
He's already got what, like 6, I think?
Yeah, something like that.
He's got E. Jean Carroll.
Right.
He's got
Letitia
Manhattan.
Letitia James comes October
Letitia James
2nd.
this year. Yep. Manhattan. He's got DC. He's got Fonnie Willis. He's got Florida with Eileen Cannon. And then there's that other one, that ACN video phone.
Right.
Did you hear about that one?
I heard bits and pieces about it. Why don't you explain it?
Well, I've heard some about it. The gist of it is, apparently there were these video phones that was basically a household phone, like a landline phone with a video attachment. And I don't know if they worked over internet or what, but you had to pay $500 for the privilege of selling these things. And then once you sold them, you had to then sell them to other people or get other people to sell them. And then it cost people a whole bunch of money, all while they're being pitched. Oh yeah, if you get the right to sell these things, it's going to make you millionaires. It uses a proven strategy. Well, the pitch man was Donald Trump.
Right. Right. It sounds
and
like
people are suing. They're not suing the company.
So Donnie.
Yeah, well, they're suing Donald Trump because he was the pitch man. He's like, oh, they're using a proven strategy. They were going to make me they're going to make you millionaires. Tons of people have already been made millionaires from this thing. And people said they bought into it because he was the pitch man.
And that sounds like a pyramid scheme.
And almost everybody lost money.
Oh, big surprise.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me too. And I guess the other part of it too is that with these things, they did work on the people that had these same phones.
Yeah.
So you had to get somebody to buy one, and then you had to convince everybody they knew to buy one to even have it work. And of course, nobody made any money.
How long ago was this? I mean, the idea of a video landline, that sounds kind of archaic.
They brought the case in 2018, I believe. And it's just now finally making its way to trial.
Wow. Yeah. Donnie's not going to do well in that. I mean, how do you accomplish all that over and above all the things hanging over his head? The one pressure that Donnie Trump seems to have that may be the most devastating to him is a cash crunch. He's stealing money from Peter to pay Paul, from his PACs to pay legal fees. And the legal fees aren't even as heavy as they will be. $40 million in 6 months. It's going to get worse over the next 6 months. He's got to continue grifting, but he's not gaining any ground with money. He's not getting as much money as he once had. And then he's got to find money to campaign with. He's in trouble. He's going to get buried. He's fucking drowning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, these people that he's grifting off of, I've heard some of them have even mortgaged their house and are on the verge of losing their house to foreclosure because they couldn't pay the second mortgage they took out to send money to Donald Trump. And
yeah,
it is just a nightmare. He's not going to be able to keep up getting money out of these people. No. He's asking people for $5, $10, $15, $25, what have you, from people who are then shorting their food budget, or, maybe they're paying their rent in two payments, or who knows what, just to send him a little more money. But why? The whole thing doesn't make any sense because he's a supposed billionaire.
Right, right. Well, that's it. And I heard one of his lawyers on TV says Donald Trump may end up having to pay this out of his own pocket. Well, good, motherfucker. You're the one that did this shit. If you're a billionaire, pony up and let's see what you got. But he doesn't. I mean, we saw his taxes, and the only thing where $1 billion comes into play was what he lost. Nothing shows he
Yeah.
made anywhere near $1 billion or that he's worth $1 billion. It's like everything Donald Trump does. It's all exaggerated. It's all bullshit just to create a perception. And unfortunately, right now he's now like the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz. You realize he's not all powerful. He's just some dumb fuck that's been lying to everybody for decades.
Yeah, you're right. But I heard an audio clip from Donnie's mouth himself where somebody asked him if he was worth $1 billion or whatever, and they said, "We can't find any proof that you're worth $1 billion. How do you get your net worth to be worth $1 billion?" And he's like, "Well, my net worth is whatever I feel like saying it is that day," or something like that.
Yeah, and his problems aren't just on the campaign trail and the grift. From what I understand, every one of his businesses is losing money. Now he's going on trial for a lawsuit with Letitia James. There's some real problems there. It's not a criminal case, but she's asking for at minimum $250 million, which I guarantee you he doesn't have. But in addition to that, that he would be banned from doing any business in New York. Now, granted, he could do business from other places, but he's got Trump Tower right in the middle of fucking New York. Well, is he going to have to sell that? Is he going to have to do some other paperwork to make his home base in Florida, but to have something in New York? I don't know. What's going to happen in that case with Letitia James is going to be devastating financially to Donald Trump, and he cannot win that case. I mean, keep in mind, Letitia James and Alvin Bragg were working together on evidence. And we know what happened with Alvin Bragg. His company was found guilty of 17 charges of fraud. So that doesn't bode very well for what's going to happen in the civil case and the lawsuit. He's fucked. He's just fucked.
Oh, he is. I mean, he's not going to win this civil case. And I like the disconnect that a lot of Trumpers have. Well, it's not him, it's his company. His company was found guilty, but he didn't do it. Who runs the damn company? Whose name is on the building? Who signs all the checks? And I realize he doesn't probably sign them all himself, and he probably doesn't fully run everything. But if my name was on the company and it was my well-being and everything else, I'd want to make sure things were going good. But every business venture he touches loses. So, I mean, it's not a stretch to believe everything against him is all legit.
I had a thought, a prediction, if you will, and I have no reason to believe that this is true, but logic tells me that this could happen. We know that Alvin Bragg prosecuted the company and the CFO. We know the company is pretty small in terms of the people running it. Donald Trump had his hands on everything. We know now that this civil lawsuit is coming up, and Donald Trump is probably going to lose that. We're talking about all the indictments, but I honestly would not be surprised if Alvin Bragg pops up again and has some criminal charges against Donald Trump for his activity in the fraud stuff in his company. Because he's got a little cocky now. Alvin Bragg has. He won that case pretty handily. He got 17 charges, convicted. It wouldn't surprise me that after everything kind of settles down, Alvin Bragg comes up and says, "Oh yeah, we're going to have some criminal charges with Donald Trump," because frankly, he did commit some crimes while he was running the Trump organization.
No, I think you're right. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And the best part would be the fact it would blindside Donnie with it. what do you mean I've gotten even more charges? Well, it's double jeopardy because Letitia James is coming after me with charges for that, or whatever dumb bullshit he would spew. Um, but yeah, I think you could be right. He could end up having some charges there.
At that point, it almost becomes ridiculous. It's almost like piling on, because what I've said before is he only has to be convicted of one or two charges and he's done. Uh, and to me, a lot of people were worried about what's going on with Florida and Aileen Cannon. I honestly think Jack Smith's got that in hand. He basically set a trap for her and he's going to have her ousted here at some point soon. But I said something in a previous podcast. I'll say it again. Who fucking cares? I mean, who cares what happens in Florida when he's going to be destroyed in Washington, D.C.? I mean, how many lives can you take from a guy? How much can you pound him before he's done? And what's happening in Washington, D.C. and Manhattan District and what's going to happen in Georgia, Florida may not fucking matter.
You could be right as far as the criminality side of it, like as far as him doing jail time. Um, Tony Michaels pointed out something on one of his podcasts the other day. He thought he came up with an idea for why, with the Florida thing, they're pushing for a skiff
Right.
at Mar-a-Lago.
Which is not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. But what Tony Michaels came up with is what he's hoping is that Judge Cannon, before she gets removed from the case, will approve it. And
Yeah.
now there'll be a bunch of other people that'll block it. It'll get overturned in the 11th Circuit. It's never going to happen. But what Tony Michaels said was he thinks this is a defense strategy from him and his lawyers that she'll approve this skiff. And then he can come out and say, well, see, I was allowed to have a skiff at Mar-a-Lago, so Mar-a-Lago is secure. So there was no mishandling of the information. This case needs to be thrown out.
Right. Yeah, he's going to try every angle he can. Unfortunately, what I've seen of his lawyers, they're not top shelf. They're not the best of the best. He couldn't afford the best of the best. And all the ones that were ever good have quit and are now talking shit about Donald Trump, going, he ain't got a fucking prayer. The only people who are still representing him are kind of half-ass attorneys that apparently need the money because they're putting their careers on the line at risk just to make some extra money.
Oh yeah, I mean, and then you look at guys like what was it, Eastman, where they've already pierced attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
How long before something comes out with these new batches of attorneys after he goes down, and they pierce privilege there too, and these guys get charges too.
I think some of these people like Eastman or Rudy Giuliani or whoever, they've stuck with this guy too long. And I'm sure they're thinking at the last minute, they're going to say, all right, I'll give up Donald Trump if you cut me a deal. I just don't think that Jack Smith needs to cut a deal. He's got everything he fucking needs at this point.
No, I don't think he needs a deal for good to go. I think, like I said on the last podcast, I think the only reason he would cut a deal is during trial of Donald Trump. If he's worried about it, then he might cut a deal with somebody else to bring in more testimony.
Yeah,
and kind of pile on. But I don't think he needs more deals. If he's already at the stage, at a point where he doesn't need another deal from anybody else. He's confident in what he's got, and he's probably going to get a conviction.
Well, yeah, definitely. And, it goes back to what we were talking about with Donald Trump pleading out. I don't know what would be the motivation to do that. Usually people plead out so they can get information on the big guy. Well, Donald Trump is the big guy. He's really got nothing to fucking offer unless he's going to just plead guilty and get it over with. But I don't think time is of a worry to them. I think it's playing this thing out to make sure we all know what happened. Donald Trump's in a bad situation because he's got nothing to trade, fucking nothing to trade.
No, he's got nothing to trade unless he's got dirt like major dirt into stuff they're not looking at into other politicians, which is possible considering how far some of them fell in line, some
Right.
of the never Trumpers. But um, I just don't think he's got anything to give up. I don't think he was smart enough to keep anything in reserve to have something to give up.
The only thing he probably has is like scandals or unethical things by other members like Lindsey Graham or Paul Gosar or whoever it is. But none of that has any bearing on this particular case. So the DA, the district attorney, the prosecutor doesn't have anything to gain from that stuff. What's going to happen is, we keep hearing, well, Donald Trump has stuff on some of these people. He might very well have. That's kind of his MO over his lifetime, holding shit over people's head and blackmailing people. But that's not going to get him out of anything. That's just going to make the shit show even bigger. And I think that's what people are afraid of. We're going to find out. You know what we might find out? We might find out that Lindsey Graham's gay. Oh my God. What happens then?
Well, for the people on the left, absolutely nothing.
Right.
We go, oh, really? We didn't know, and just move on. The people on the right, I mean, that could be enough to cost him his seat. They
But
wouldn't vote for him. How dare they?
how do they not know? We all know. We don't
Because
care.
Lindsay hasn't admitted it, so it doesn't happen. It's behind closed doors. That's what they want to go back to. They don't care. They supposedly don't care what you do behind closed doors. They just don't want it out in public. So as long as he doesn't admit it, and they don't have to know about the proof or anything about it happening,
Right.
they can ignore it and say it doesn't happen, doesn't exist. It must all go away.
But if they find out that he is gay or a cross dresser or whatever they say he is, maybe then Lindsey cracks, leaves the Republican Party, and becomes a Democrat. How about that? That would be awesome.
I mean, for having the seat, and sure, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him.
No, fuck no. No, no, no way. I think Lindsey Graham's career may be done after Georgia comes out. People are questioning whether Lindsey is going to be amongst those indictments in Georgia. I think he almost has to be because Donald Trump made one call to Brad Raffensperger. Lindsey made two calls, and he wasn't the president. He's a senator from South Carolina, and he's calling Georgia to try to coerce these people. And they have the evidence that that's what he's doing. I think Lindsey Graham gets nailed for that easier than Donald Trump does.
You could be right, especially if they have it recorded that's what he was, and what he said in his own words. I mean, I think he was banking of at anything on it either A, working and they'd find the votes and he'd be justified,
Right.
or that he could somehow say speech and debate clause, I got immunity,
He tried that
and
though. He tried that though, and they said, "Fuck yourself."
exactly. But I think when he made the call, he was banking on one of those two things. And yeah, it's not gonna work.
Now, it's amazing how far on the ledge these Republicans have put themselves to accommodate Donald Trump. It can't be that they love him so much. So maybe the idea that he has something on these people, or they're afraid of him for him turning his base on them. I don't know what it is, but these guys have put themselves on the ledge so far out, and it surprises me that they've hung on so long. I really honestly believed that once Donald Trump was out of office, they'd wash their hands of him, knowing that he's a loser and that he was going to be no help to him, and that they would walk away from him. I was amazed when that didn't happen. I mean, it was an opportunity for them to do that, and you would think they'd recognize the opportunity and do it to try to get some normality back in the party, but they fucking refused to do it. They kept embracing it, much like they embrace the Roe v. Wade, overturning that. I don't get it. That's going to cost them an election, but they keep grabbing onto it and sticking with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for some of them, I do think he's got stuff on him. Like it wouldn't surprise me if like on his way down, it comes out that somehow he's got something on Matt Gaetz that proves, he did whatever he did with the miners, and wouldn't surprise me if he takes some of them down with him, and that's what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
As for the rest, I think they don't see a way out. They see him as popular. He's the last real popular person they've had,
Yeah.
and I think they see their own demise on the wall, and they're like, well, this guy's really popular. We got to stick by him because he's going to make us relevant and keep us relevant.
I think they find themselves, I think a lot of these people are feeling like they're trapped. They're damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they walk away from Donald Trump, they're fucked. If they stick with Donald Trump, they're fucked. So all they can really do is double down and hope for the best. But the best isn't going to be there. They are all going to get taken down in this. There are so many angles that they're coming at with this J6 thing and the overturning the 2020 election. Either Georgia or Jack Smith is going to get every fucking one of them. And it's going to be a stain on their careers, certainly. But it might just take them out of the equation altogether by putting them in fucking jail.
Oh, that'd be great. You start taking out some of the trash. Lindsey Graham, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Gosar, Gomer, all of them. Jim Jordan. I mean, and like speaking of Jordan, he might be another one that Donald Trump has something on. Maybe he's got something on him about Ohio State because
Right.
he fell right in line with Donald Trump. Maybe there's some evidence there that shows some criminality or something.
Well, you got to wonder about your guy Grassley in Iowa too, because he was kind of in the thick of it with that January 6th thing. He's the Senate President pro tempore,
Yeah.
or whatever. Um, and it's a weird situation. They don't talk about this story much, but when they were chasing down Mike Pence, saying they were going to hang him, they brought him down to the basement, and the secretary or the Secret Service was trying to get him out of the building to keep him safe, presumably. But even before that, Grassley was kind of talking about what he's going to do when he has to take over the Senate. It's like he knew something going into this. And this may not do well for him because he was a high ranking person. And if he knew anything about this and he was tied to it at all, that's going to be a fuck of a legacy for your guy Grassley.
Oh, probably. And um, I hope it takes him down a notch. Maybe not even a notch. It takes him out of Congress. It's going to be a stain on his legacy. It might even end up putting him in jail, which if he was a part of it, he would deserve. And then I kind of hope that Kim Reynolds would do what I heard the plan was if he ever became incapacitated in some way and she had to fill his seat, is that I heard she was going to go after appointing his grandson, who is the
Oh,
current Speaker of the Iowa House, to fill the seat.
really?
That way, when people come around to vote again, they see Grassley on the ticket and they just keep voting for the same name they've always voted for and don't think twice. Oh, Grassley's running again. No big deal. We'll vote for Grassley. Uh, but if this takes him out of the equation and stains his legacy and maybe puts him in jail, and she tries it, maybe it's enough to get that seat back for the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you think that when the pressure hits and maybe some of these people are implicated, you think we're going to see mass resignations? I mean, we've heard about that with the Supreme Court, Alito and Clarence Thomas kind of throwing around the idea of retiring. That has nothing to do with age. That is pressure, possible legal pressure that they see in the offing. That's the only reason they would talk about that. I'm wondering if we're going to see something out of that with members of the House and members of the Senate, because it's not just Grassley. It could be Ted Cruz and some other people in the Senate as well. I wonder if these folks will think they can get out from underneath this by just retiring. They won't, but they may take some drastic actions because they're scared shitless.
Maybe I tend to believe more that if any of them resign, it's going to be more of a Spiro Agnew situation
Yeah,
where they resign as part of
a deal.
a deal or whatever. It's like I could see maybe Grassley taking a deal like that, saying, "Hey, I'll plead no contest. I'll resign. You keep me out of jail. Let me live out my last 5, 10 years, whatever I've got left at home." And because even he's 89 years old, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
you know, and he can't have more than 5, 10 years left anyway. And I think he would much rather spend it at home with his family than in a prison cell. But you
You
know,
think at 89, you think he has 5 or 10 years possible? I think maybe two.
I mean, I just threw that out there because it is possible. We've got several people that are coming up on 100. I know Jimmy Carter's at 98. You got, I think, Dick Van Dyke's at 98.
Yeah, true.
Betty White almost made 100. You know, so
It's
it's
conceivable.
possible.
Yeah.
It's conceivable. And even if it's, depending on his health, etc., even if it's not, you know, realistic, he might believe it's conceivable that he's got 5 to 10 years left.
Oh, I'm sure he does. The arrogance is there with Grassley. He's kind of a goof anyway. Maybe we should start another a House of Representatives where we have people over 85 in it and just kind of laugh at the goofiness. We got Dianne Feinstein and we've got Mitch McConnell. There's a whole lot of Republicans that are just old as fuck. And we're going to lose Republicans just by virtue of attrition.
Yeah, yeah. And the young voters aren't voting for Republicans, and if they can't become palatable to young people, it could be like to what they called the era of good feelings. It was in the early 1800s where basically one party controlled like everything with like a 60 to 70% margin
Yeah,
because the other party fell apart. And we could
right.
have something similar to that happen again for a few years anyway. Um, so I mean, these old people, they gotta go. We've got too many baby boomers and silent generation that got into power, and they should have given up the levers of power already to the Gen Xers 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to that. And I honestly believe that not in 2024. We're still going to have Joe Biden. I hear people saying, "Well, this guy should run, or that guy should run." There's even somebody in my home state. His name is Phillips. He's talking about running in a primary against Biden. I just want to take that guy and go, "Look, I like you as a representative. You're a Democrat. You're doing a good job for what you're doing. But what the fuck are you thinking? You're nobody, first of all. Nobody knows who you are, and you're going to wade into this. Fucking do something, be do something like Gavin Newsom or something. Speak out." But all these people, it's funny. I think Democrats that want to run against Biden are thinking the same thing that Republicans who are running against Donald Trump. I think the Chris Christie's and the other people that are running in the Republican Party primary think that Donald Trump is going to drop out at some point, which is probably true. And then they can go in and scoop up all his votes, which won't work because his people just won't vote for him. But I think there's some Democrats feeling that way too, like this Phillips guy, that Joe Biden's going to be 82. Maybe he doesn't even make it to 2024. I want to be there just in case. And fucking politics in this country is so goddamn mercenary, and it's all about power and money. And I'm getting fucking tired of it because they get lost on what their real job is.
Oh, you're right. And I think they are probably thinking maybe he won't make it. But then we need to be doing everything we can to back Kamala. I mean,
Yeah.
she should be front and center. He should be pushing her. Most people like, oh, well, she hasn't done much. Well, she's in a role that doesn't do much.
Right.
But they
And
need to be showcasing her and showing her off and making people, because it's going to be a referendum on her.
it is. And that's kind of on Joe Biden's plate to do. I mean, Joe Biden and the administration should be showcasing her because it's going to be beneficial to them in the election. If they feel comfortable with her as a vice president, they're going to be more willing to take a chance on a guy that's 82 that might keel over halfway through his fucking term. So, and I don't know why Joe Biden hasn't done that or the administration hasn't done that, but I think that's crucial to the 2024 election. I mean, I think Joe Biden wins no matter what, but it would be a good idea to build the stock in Kamala Harris. I personally don't have a problem if she ended up being president. I don't have a problem with that. But so many people just hear things or don't hear things and they make judgments about people. She's no worse a candidate than any other fucking Democrat, to be honest with you. And we should try to make people feel more comfortable with her as that possibility.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if what we've come to terms with and it ends up being, say, Chris Christie, um, as the Republican nominee, that could be the only thing that sways people to maybe vote Republican is Donald Trump's age, or not Donald Trump, Joe Biden's age, and fact that they haven't heard enough about Kamala that they're worried about her being president, so they vote for Chris Christie.
Yeah. You know, it's funny about Chris Christie. I hear people talking about him a lot because he's loud. But if you look at the polling, he's the lowest one of the group. He's under 1%, under 1%. People look at him as a potential candidate just because he's loud and he talks a lot. But in terms of people interested in voting for him, it's almost non-existent.
Well, I heard actually that something Ron DeSantis did made his numbers drop, and I don't know the new numbers of the poll, but I heard there's at least one poll out there now that had Chris Christie over Ron DeSantis.
Hmm. And that tells us everything we need to know about polls. You see one thing, I see another thing. We can't trust those motherfuckers as far as we can throw them.
No, like I said, it was one poll. I mean, but they were using it just as a point that, hey, whatever, I can't remember whatever goof DeSantis had made. Um, like, oh, well, see, look, it hurt his poll numbers. Even Chris Christie's doing better than him in this one poll.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it's probably, old people that all have seen the Barbie movie that had hot dogs for lunch that day. You know, it's so it's hard to say who they choose and why they choose it. You can make polls to say pretty much anything. So I don't even I try not to look at them because it doesn't really tell me much. Um, but nonetheless, Chris Christie uh, is still way behind Donald Trump and presumably behind Ron DeSantis. And I don't think Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. I don't think they'll be around and healthy enough, either, you know, in terms of their image or physically to even be the nominees. And that's going to put the Republicans in a bad situation. You got a bunch of people that aren't very popular, and now you're going to have to choose one of them to be your candidate, in spite of the fact that they're not that popular.
Yeah, you're right. Like that's why I keep saying it's going to be Chris Christie, because I think they could get behind a guy like Chris Christie. You know, former governor. He's more middle of the road, old school Republican, and he would be, out of everybody who's currently in the field, most likely to sway independent voters.
Yeah, that's possible. The interesting thing, if not for Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, he'd be the biggest piece of shit in the primary group. He would. He would. Based on what I've talked to people about his time in New Jersey, he was fucking horrible.
True, true. I mean that sounds like almost something Donald Trump would have said about him. You know, making it a fat joke.
Yeah, no kidding. That maybe should be his campaign. Vote for Chris Christie. He's the third worst piece of shit in the in the group.
Uh,
I don't know.
yeah.
Well, we're going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. Eric, I want to thank you for joining me today. I needed the help today. It's been a long day and it's been hard. As I told you, I got up early because I had to chase around my granddaughter. Way too fucking old for that stuff, man. It's just hard. It was funny, we were my both my sons and my granddaughter were at this playground park where they got the climbing thing up, and we got the little girl. She's climbing over everything. She's going to the top and waving, and her dad's looking and watching, and I'm trying to keep track of her. And then I lose track of her up there, but it's pretty confined. So we know she's good, but we can't see her. And then my son comes by. I go, "Do you see her?" I go, "I don't see her." And so we're still up there looking, and a couple seconds later, I feel somebody tug my leg, and I look down. It's my granddaughter, and she says, "Where's my daddy?" I go, "How the fuck did you get down here? You were up 3 stories, and now it's." I think there's some magic shit going on there because she does this all the time. I'll be watching, thinking she's up there, and then all of a sudden I look down and she's on a swing. I don't know how she made that transition that quickly.
Kids
I
are
don't.
magic.
I don't know what it is. I don't know if my mind is slower than my body, but that's a distinct possibility.
I don't know. But kids can do some weird things.
They do some weird things. Well, Eric, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. I'm going to be in Georgia when they hear this podcast. I'll be on my way or in Georgia, so I'm excited about Fonnie Willis and what's going to happen this week. I'm not going to be close to Fulton County, but I'm going to be walking around with a big smile on my face in Savannah once once we hear what Fonnie Willis is going to do.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to hear what it's going to be. I hope you have a safe trip, and thanks for having me on.
No problem. And those of you listening, thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. We I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow, Monday, the start of yet another week. So we'll talk to you Monday.